The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers Cable or Rogers TV.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Happy New Year. It's our first episode of 2025, live here in Mennequist, also known as St. John, the unceded territory of the Pescatawamacati, Mi'kmaq, and Musqueam peoples. I'm here with Brent downstairs.
We're on the same camera today, so if it sounds funny, this is our first, well, it's not our first. We used to do this face-to-face.
Yes, long time ago. We're almost into year two, so year three, because our second anniversary is coming up in March.
That's right. So we're working into year three, finishing up year two, still on whatever season this is because
we just made that up.
Because Lisbon wants us to have seasons.
Yeah.
So welcome back. A new year, maybe a new you. Yeah. I think a new us. I think we're going to be going in a pretty different direction this season for NB Polypod. I will say it has been really encouraging to hear from people, even though we haven't been recording.
Yes.
For all of you Patreon supporters, continuing to support us, even though we took a fairly extensive time off there around the holidays, leading the elections or coming out of the election season and trying to scrub that all up and then also talk about the new government here provincially. But there is a ton of new reality that we live in. It doesn't even feel like the reality people were running on. I mean, you as a candidate running on in September, but like it doesn't even feel like that world, the same world anymore. And it's only been 4 months. So there is a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about. Thank you to the Rogers fans too. We've been running into people recently who have seen us on Rogers TV. So thank you to Rogers for holding on as well.
I know. I think Rogers maybe played some replays.
Yeah, they did.
Some encore editions.
Yes. While people were bored over the holidays, I think they took in some NB Polypod, which is just great. Nice, quiet nap show,
Yeah. Let's put our voices on and go to sleep. And tell everybody that you're educated on New Brunswick politics.
For great, Christmas table chat. Basically. There's been so much that's gone on, and now we're in a whole new government, a whole new sittings coming up, I believe.
Where's Trudeau?
Trudeau's gone.
He gone. Who's going to replace him? We don't know. We'll talk about that. We have
the realities of Trump coming in here.
Yes,
a lot of threats about annexations. We've been
international man of mystery here coming on the international annexation scene. So we'll see who the frig is left as a nation after this. Today, we really just wanted to kick off the new year, reflect a little bit on 2024, but also start to grab your attention. Our listeners, a few hundred of you that download the podcast. We don't know how many watch on Rogers, but it's pretty interesting, the fact that we run into so many people here in our town who see us on Rogers, but we know that Rogers streams this podcast all over New Brunswick on all the local channels. So how many of you Rogers listeners are out there? Some of you have emailed us. I'm going to bring up the banner right now for those of you who want to see how to get a hold of us.
I've never actually seen how this all works.
Yeah, you're seeing the back end.
Wow,
this is my view.
Usually just to sit back and relax, not worry about a thing.
That's right. So mbpolypod@gmail.com, patreon.com/mbpolypod. If you want to be an over and beyond, above and beyond supporter of the NB Poly podcast, helps pay for our subscriptions. It helps pay for our promotion. And this year we are hoping to have, there we go. Nice camera work.
Yeah, there we go.
It's like two-person operation. 20 years ago, we would have had a cameraman. We would have had a nice big desk. We would have had a nice big screen.
There's a lot of hallway that's being displayed.
I know.
That's okay.
So right off the top, let's just talk about what we're hoping for coming up. So our Patreon listeners, you're going to get an email from us coming up pretty soon. We actually were going to send it out over Christmas, and then we just
get lost in the inbox, I think.
And we also were busy with our own kids. I mean, we talk all the time, but how was your Christmas?
Oh, wow. Oh, it was lovely. It was, of course, Beatrix's first Christmas, and it was a great time to actually kind of just not do anything other than bake things and decorate stuff and hang out with kids. And
You baked a ton.
I did.
I did one batch of shortbread cookies in the amount of time it took you to do 5.
Yeah, I know. I'm very efficient.
And
True.
I'm very slow.
Well, it's funny because then I forgot about this thing that happens when you have a newborn. It's like you have these really short stints of time that you're able to do things. And so you kind of, as you're sitting there nursing, you're stacking all the things that you're going to be doing in that sprint. And so it basically became that over the holidays. And it was quite effective in the end. It was Beatrix is in the swing. Okay, now I can do these 15 items on the list and in time for when she wakes up.
No, we're definitely in a new world here with our little one, Beatrix. It's funny because we had a 4-hour public hearing last night?
We did.
Or 3-hour anyway, 3-hour public hearing and like 5 hours of council.
Yeah.
No, it was more than that. We got there at 4. We didn't leave until 11:30.
Yeah, so that's 7 hours.
Anyway, on a development. And so we have that to talk about in some ways, because I think that's an important piece.
What we want for this year, I think, for the province and for everybody here.
So we're recording this on the 14th.
Yes.
Lots been going on. I announced a new training program, housing program. I got to be in pictures with Minister David Hickey, as well as a Minister Alton Townsend, and we had a chance to serve breakfast at the city market here in the city with Minister John Dornan. I have to say, not that I'm trying to, shame anyone or downplay anybody's enthusiasm or expertise, but John Dornan, Minister of Health here in the province of New Brunswick, is a very eager beaver.
Yeah, he's a lovely name.
He's a sweetheart, and I don't like liberals. So those of you who know me know that I don't like liberals, and it's nothing against the people who are liberals. It's just against what seems to be part of that party, and what seems to be the outcomes of that party and the dispositions of that party. So it's all partisan. I'm sorry about that, and
I think you're watching it play out in the federal sphere right now too. And the liberalism is starting to get really frustrating, and the liberalism in the U.S. is extremely frustrating. Dead.
The liberalism in the U.S. is dead.
And so it's sort of like we need to be mindful of what we're implementing here, right?
I know.
What kind of liberalism?
Yes. Yeah. What kind of?
That's what we're critical of.
What kind of progressive politics we're going to have? I had multiple conversations today. It's only like 2:30. And I've already had multiple conversations of people who are just angry. These are people who are locally here in St. John, losing businesses shutting down, don't want to be alarmist, not trying to be a negative Nelly here at all. But, you guys know me. I'm always a little bit more of the alarmist, a little bit more of the negative Nelly and whatnot. And Joe tends to bring a nice positive outlook and a good challenge to that cynicism that I can be guilty of having. But we're coming into a weird time, folks. And so if you're listening to this pod, just know that we want to kick this year off with refocusing on the people of New Brunswick, the political conversation in New Brunswick. So I alluded it to before. We want to send an email out to our Patreon supporters, because you guys are paying to see us here. And there's lots of other people who are supporting us by downloading and listening. There's no question about that. So if you want to get that email, because our goal with that email is to send that out and to gather sort of the chatter, what I call the chattering class. I know I didn't make that term up.
No.
I've heard it on
more of your podcasts.
Yeah, different podcasts before. But the chattering class of the politicos of New Brunswick, if you want to be on that email where we find a date, we bring on 15, 20 people onto a stream like this.
Yeah.
And we just have a chat. And we're going to not regulate, but we're going to have a bit of an order to that meeting. We're going to moderate that meeting. Yeah. You've got a nice background in moderation. Maybe you should. And
we shall host a great discussion, I think, about what are your hopes for 2025 or even the next 5 years? Really, we're halfway through this decade.
Yep.
What are we going to be looking like in 2030? I think is even a better question, because right now we have this new government, it's fresh start. We know things take forever. we were dealing with issues last night that have, 30-year implications, right?
Oh yeah.
So this stuff takes a while. So what are we looking like going into the next decade?
Yeah, what's the temperature out there? What are people thinking are important issues? What are the canaries in the coal mine about this government? What are the canaries in the coal mine about the federal government? What about local government? What's going on there? And here's the star of the show, little Miss Beatrix here behind the cords.
Hello.
Hey, dude. If you're watching us online, you can see her. If you're not, just know that Beatrix in the background, if you hear a little squawk, she's very chatty these days.
Yes, very
She wants to chat. And
no wonder there's a lot of chatter going on in this house.
yes.
For sure.
Oh, she just spit up.
Oh no. Here we go. All good.
Anyway, so that email is going to come out. We're going to convene that meeting. We want to do a live event, maybe two in 2025. So
where should it be? Like
where? Yeah. That's right. Where is the? We know we have a lot of listeners here in St. John, people who know us and are part of our network, but we also have listeners across this province, people who are far more intelligent than us, far more connected than us. We've had how many guests?
We've had 16 guests. I went through and counted there today, and from all across the world. As far away as Ireland,
oh yes,
and Alberta,
and Noel French, our friend who was on this pod, who gave us just like sage level insight and wisdom into municipal government. And I mean, municipal government in the US, Canada, Ireland, the UK, it isn't that different. We have different buckets that we can play with. We have different mandates that we have to perform. But the reality is your local government, as Donald J. Savoy pointed out on this podcast, one of our probably most prolific guests, honestly, big get for us to have Don, to have him slow down and stop and talk to me. You weren't on that pod.
No.
Was, I'm not going to say once in a lifetime, but this guy has such a grasp of the political spectrum, the political landscape, and the research. I mean, he's an adjunct professor at Oxford University. He's not somebody that is a fly-by-night type of individual in this Canadian political landscape or New Brunswick political landscape for sure. So to have him slow down and talk to us was pretty phenomenal. And he pointed out quite rightly that your local government's the most trusted government. It's the least conspiratorial government, although Gavin Newsom in California is getting a lot. He's a governor, but I'll never forget that TikTok interviewing the mayor of LA County and people talking to her about conspiracies and hurling accusations about these wildfires and all of this, and Mel Gibson on Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson on CNN going off on his crazy tirades about stuff that, I think it's crazy. Maybe some of you think it's great. Let us know if you think it's great.
So you want to be the Joe Rogan of the left is what you're saying.
I don't want to be the Joe Rogan of the left. I want to be the Alex Jones of the left.
Oh, no.
I think climate change causes autism.
Okay.
And I think we need to militantly fight climate. I'm just joking. But
sounds like one of his hot takes.
It's a crazy world we're in, and we're about to. It's like I saw somebody talking about it, and they were like, "Is it just me, or is the entire world sort of in this tense, oh, what's going to happen next?" kind of holding pattern, whether you're in Russia, Ukraine, China, Thailand, the Congo, whether you're in Sudan. South Sudan's about to have elections. And don't forget, South Sudan's a new country that formed out of the Sudan, proper Sudan. And massive issues there, massive global catastrophes occurring. You've got a Mexican president who is on this international mission to oppose sort of where Trump's at, but also to completely reform their judicial system. We're not going to go into all that, but just to say, I don't think we're exaggerating when we say we've never seen in our lifetime the level of disjointed politics, strange politics. Beatrix is giving us the look right now. It's a little, we've just never seen it.
No.
And what it will mean for us here in this province and the issues we have is going to be anybody's guess. But hopefully we don't resort to our kind of worst instincts as a species that we've seen in the past. And hopefully we don't sell ourselves short on some of the changes that need to occur for the average person.
Well, we keep sort of watching these sci-fi futuristic television shows over the holidays, and they all speak to this, not so distant future of what happens when the world sort of comes into some horrible catastrophe. And the LA fires really, to me too, were a big one, where it's like all of a sudden there's this massive, his like absolutely critical place in the world completely burned to the ground so easily. And we're living it. And what did somebody say? It's like, you're the one recording the video. You're watching all these videos until you're the one recording it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can't tell me that people in the Palisades in California ever thought they'd be recording the complete destruction of thousands of homes and institutions. And
in 2 days, 48 hours.
It's still going.
Exactly. And it's just like all of a sudden everything just went up. So I'm going to pass her over to you.
Oh, yeah.
So I just think that the world is on edge, waiting for this next 5 years, what it's going to look like. We now have this Trump time bomb sitting below us.
He's going to be empowered.
It's going to affect us. It's going to affect us if any of this tariff nonsense goes on. It's going to affect us already. It's already affecting us. I heard with regards to the immigration piece that the Liberals implemented in reducing it, like our schools here in New Brunswick rely a lot on newcomers to populate those classes.
Yeah, especially our community college, universities.
And in Algonquin College in Ontario is like in a huge deficit and because of this. And so you're going to start to see all these after effects of some of the policy decisions that have been made. And so the next 5 years, I think, are critical. We've seen a ton of like, no, we don't want this. We don't want that. We don't want. And now we're going to have a new prime minister. We have a new premier. We have a new American president. So now it is this like big old question mark. So like you just alluded to, it's like, can we get out of here without murdering each other maybe and move on into a world where, these kids have some place to exist that isn't a nightmare. Like sometimes it in some ways this Christmas felt, it's like, was it the last Christmas?
I know. There were so many things that went nice about this Christmas. We had a gorgeous snowfall. It was a lot. But when I was seeing all that snow come down, I was like, who the hell cares? I want to be here as long as I can go pick up my kids from their mother and bring them here to this like lovely Christmas house. But when I was looking around, I was like, this kind of Christmas doesn't happen very often. Like,
fishes, like,
and people were lovely, but it did feel like a strange interlude. So do sign up on our Patreon. All that say, do sign up on our Patreon, even if you're a $5 a month supporter. Actually, scratch that. Even if you're a free member of our Patreon, patreon.com/NBPollyPod, you'll get that email. It's going to come out. Let's put it out next week after we put this pod out so people have an opportunity to listen.
We want to get some dates from people.
And have that roundtable to set the agenda for this podcast, because the goal of this podcast is to have these conversations with New Brunswickers to elevate the conversation that's happening political, get it out of the ditch about what people think, and to try to provide our own insights from whatever limited perspectives we have here in Mennequist and St. John.
Well, it was interesting. Some of the folks followed up after the public hearing last night, because we had given some guidance to people around like how these public hearings work and just what the next steps are, like how you can advocate, blah, blah. And the comment was, this isn't something that naturally comes to people. They don't naturally know how to work their way through a public consultation process and a public hearing and rezoning and how to be in opposition or not and things like that. So it was like, okay, well, maybe we can start to have some of these conversations around, how do you get engaged politically without necessarily having to be an elected person, depending on what you're doing in your own community. So I think there'd be there was some really great people in these podcasts so far who I think would be great to have on a
To have back,
live stream
to have a.
and be able to ask questions.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, it would be nice to have a Doug Griffiths and an old French and you know, a Fred LaForge and of course our good friend Sean Rouse, who's single-handedly our co-host, if we call him that. Terry McMacken, you know, giving us some really good perspective from her neck of the woods and her political background. So anyway, that's coming up today. We're 20 minutes in. Let's get into some meat. So 2024.
I'm glad it's gone.
That's gone. 2024 was really hard.
Yes.
What do you think is sort of the highlight of 2024 for New Brunswick, for NB Polypod, for our podcast?
Our podcast? Oh my goodness. I mean, I loved the way we were able to sort of like have Sean there and to have people around to help fill in for me when I was unable to be there throughout my pregnancy and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you were running a candidacy.
And I'm doing all these things. It was a crazy year. I'm sure I'll look back on it more fondly than it was sort of living it. But I do believe that there's this wonderful place where this podcast has been built to a point where I'm not a necessary piece of it. Like, yes, of course, I want us all to be on here all the time.
You're a co-founder of this podcast. You're necessary.
But it's lovely to know that there's people out there in the community who are able to pitch hit from you. So I think that was a pod highlight for me.
Pod highlight. I mean, my pod highlight has been of 2024 was just the cliff hit. The cliff that we seem to go off of with Blaine Higgs.
Oh yeah, he's just gone.
We only like 2024. We only talked about Blaine Higgs and Christian nationalism and how that was infiltrating New Brunswick politics. And could they, would they, might they? And will Faytine win her seat? And will that mean the end of the Progressive Conservative Party as we knew it? For people like your father, Carl Killen, who was our first guest, former MLA Carl Killen, and now we don't have any of that. Like, I don't know who it was that wrote about it. It might have been Adam Huris with Telegraph Journal, talking about, it might have been a Twitter post. I can't remember who it was. Sorry, Adam, if it wasn't you, whoever it was, I can't remember. But there was this idea, the sense that, oh my gosh, like, here is the fascination of our political landscape for the past years, and now nowhere to be found. He's nowhere public. We haven't heard him say anything. He's not written an article. He hasn't written a post. He hasn't done an interview. He hasn't showed up at a fundraiser. He's not high-fiving Pierre Poilievre on the bandwagon anymore. No. It's
like poof,
gone. And now we've got, of course, our own St. John.
Contingent, right?
Not premier in waiting. I won't call him that, but we have our own interim leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, Glenn Savoy.
That's right. Among a bunch of ministers in St. John.
Yeah.
So you have this, what they call it, the Southern Caucus, I guess.
Southern Caucus. Yeah,
it's a group of our MLAs down here in the south of New Brunswick, and they would respectively do the same thing, cluster around different regions around the province.
Yeah.
We have yet to see them in action together, and to see how that's going to work. But it definitely feels like the temperature's gone down a ton, and I've had this
black lung.
Whoosh, whoosh. I've had this conversation with multiple people about how it just feels like, okay, we can just not talk about politics for a while. It just felt like the fever had broken.
Yeah.
Because it was a fever pitch. It felt like a fever pitch for, and when you're at that level of like hyper responsiveness to things for a long period of time, I'm pretty sure it leads to like trauma in your
it's just like there's a vacuum.
Oh my gosh.
Because you've been totally focused on tracking where this bad direction was going, this cliff, right? And then all of a sudden we didn't fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
But Susan Holt remains the lone liberal stronghold in this country. And, I've seen Susan putting some stuff on socials, doing interviews, putting some
week overviews out, which is great.
Yeah, attacking Trump.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Susan Holt be a fairly get the shoulder tap from one of our liberal leader candidates. So let's segue there a little bit. 2024 was a year of how in God's name is this going to work out with this election coming up in New Brunswick? Because, and rightfully so, because there were very, active, well-funded political interests on multiple sides occurring, especially when you think of the Christian nationalism wings, Coalition for Life, Faiteen's groups, all of that. Now, Faiteen is still in the political foray.
Yes,
but
especially with this upcoming federal election.
Yeah,
I've seen some posts out there.
She's a two-time loser.
Yeah,
and I know that Peter Mansbridge on the bridge did that for a whole year, calling Trump a two-time loser, twice impeached, like just scathing on the guy. So I know
bode well, though.
Maybe I'm making that mistake by calling her out for that, but she has lost twice. She lost the leadership, or not leadership. Right. She lost the nomination for the MP position or the candidacy for the MP to run against Wayne Long. Wayne Long is not running anymore. We currently believe Don Darling is being tapped to replace Wayne.
That's a town rumor.
That's a town rumor. And Wayne, one of the liberal MLAs that's been here for multiple Trudeau, the whole time. He's been here since Trudeau's been here for 9 years. And he's not going to run again. And there's new ridings here. And Pierre Poilievre is expected to make a breakthrough, but that was when Justin Trudeau was the guy that we're running against. So it leads me to this question. What should New Brunswickers think about this federal election?
Mm-hmm.
And I know I asked you that question. I put you on the spot, so I'll give my answer first.
Okay, cool.
So what should New Brunswickers think about this leadership race, the race to replace, as our I would wish we could say friends of the pod.
It's like
I'm a fanboy of
you are
Hurley and the Curse of Politics and David Hurley,
or, Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
I mean Corey Tonight and these guys, because I appreciate the depth of knowledge and experience they have in this political landscape, but I believe I have some some diametrically different positions than them on some things. I don't align with them, but I can respect the game, if you will. And they have great podcast games. So if you're not listening to The Bridge, Peter Mansbridge, if you're not listening to the Hurly Burly or Curse of Politics or this new one.
That's a good post. It's Brent's Picks.
Brent's Picks. There we go.
Podcast.
Air Quotes Media has got some great stuff out there. But I think they're wrong on a number of things. And I'm gonna start with this. What should you be paying attention to with this federal leadership? We don't have Dom LeBlanc. That surprised me. I really thought Dominic LeBlanc was going to have a nod and a tap. And by the sounds of it, if you listen to some of the chatter in class that I mentioned, they will tell you that the Quebec cohort of the Liberal Party is quite surprised that Dominic LeBlanc is not running, because the heritage of the Liberal Party of Canada, what political scientists call the natural governing party of Canada, because it is. Mm-hmm. The Liberal Party of Canada is they're the All Blacks of, if anybody's into rugby. They just win 85% of the time, right? You go back to Laurier and you just see major swaths of time governed by the Liberal Party of Canada.
That's true. We love a Liberal.
Sure. But it's a big deal. And so Dom LeBlanc, they have always gone from Francophone, Quebec candidate to English candidate. And, you've got pretty major Liberal leaders on both the Anglophone and Francophone. We just had Justin Trudeau. So the idea is we're going to an Anglophone, but you can't win in Canada without winning substantially in Quebec. Mm-hmm. And, the Francois Legault with his party, his really one of a kind party in Quebec, is slated to lose pretty substantially. So there's an appetite for change in Quebec. We don't know what that's going to mean, but by the sounds of it, people are like, holy smokes, we don't even have a Francophone candidate in this battle. Chrystia Freeland has not announced yet that I know of.
No.
Expected to announce. Is in Alberta. Mark Carney. Actually, I don't even know where Mark's from, but he's governor of Bank of Canada. He is not francophone. I know he's bilingual. I know Chrystia Freeland's quite bilingual. She's quite competent, but it's not the same, right? The Quebec language is not the be-all, end-all. There's a Quebec culture that comes with that. And Dom LeBlanc was kind of the closest they could have hoped for like a Anglophone,
Alberta again. Really.
Francophone.
Carney was born in the Northwest Territories, but grew up in Alberta.
Wow. So anyway, that's the race that we know of. Dom LeBlanc is out. We know. I believe that Atlantic Canada, and I went on as the MB Poli pod today, actually, on Air Quotes Media when they announced this. I'm going to pass off Beatrix. Sorry, she just woke up. I went on Air Quotes Media and I just said, look, I believe with my very amateur but belligerent opinion that I have about politics, that Atlantic Canada will be the kingmaker. We will decide who is the future leader of the Liberal Party and the next prime minister. Could be the next prime minister for 2 months, 2 weeks, 6 months. I don't know that.
Yeah, what's the timeline on all of that?
It's expected to be done by March.
Okay.
The Constitution has certain timelines, like 90 days, this and that, but like, who gives a shit about the Constitution these days? Like, people are not worried about following the rules anymore. They want to take an axe to the not working, to the that's making their life more expensive, to the people who are profiting off of their life being expensive, and they don't even know who to be mad at. So the Liberals have an uphill battle because Pierre Poilievre has raised more money than anybody, has recruited more new members than anybody to the Conservative Party. I don't think the guy has anything qualitative to say about our current reality. I almost said this last night at our public hearing. You know, all these people, these 60-some people who came out to speak against the development, you know, I hope you realize that there is a prime minister in the waiting, Pierre Poilievre, who wants to take away your right to mobilize publicly against developments.
Yeah, take away public hearings.
That's it. Like, this guy wants to spin the tin. He wants to axe the tax. He wants to sink the ships. He wants to stop the crime and build the homes. Like, he is a nursery rhyme politician that's grabbed a bunch of attention. But when you listen to the guy talk about things, you hear very clearly that he thinks NIMBYism is something to be challenged. And so it does have implications for even the municipal level government stuff. You've got a federal prime minister who's constantly taking a baseball bat to municipal elected officials. Don't you worry. Municipal elected officials that lack backbone and lack quality will fall in line, and they will start echoing and parroting that nonsense.
Well, I'm sure lots of them would love not to have public hearings and confront the residents who have genuine concerns about, you know, what's going on in their host communities. So, you know, that to me would probably suit a number of folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate because I think one of the things that came up last night was the notion of how many meters away from a development do you give notice. And, you know, there's some instances where 100 meters may be like one home. So common sense, though, would indicate, well, maybe we should do like the road leading up to this development, for instance. But because that's not in the act,
Municipal Planning Act,
they don't do it. But to me, it's like you can't legislate or create policy around discretion in bureaucracy.
No, and in this climate, you certainly can't.
No.
So all that to say is, I do think there is a lot at stake for the Liberal Party. Who they pick and how that leader picks, or how that leader runs and communicates, will change a lot. They'll either take the wind of the sail of Pierre Poilievre's framework that he operates from. And, you know, he just did a, you know, he did a long interview with Jordan Peterson.
Mhm.
He's starting to do that work that worked for Trump. He's starting to take that, podcast approach, that long-winded, long format. I like that format. We're running a friggin' podcast for that reason, because most of the time when we have a mic at council, we have 3 minutes to speak. You can't nuance 3 minutes. So there is a lot at stake here. I think a lot of people are angry. It's easy to sign up for Pierre Poilievre because he seems just as angry, but people don't know what to be angry at. And it would be no surprise. Was curious last night, how many people in this audience are planning to vote for Pierre Poilievre and think he's going to change the game? Ironically, they're here mobilized as not a democratically elected, but as a community body coming together for common interests to make their case in a democratic institution, our council chamber, and to be heard by elected officials for long periods of time. Everybody who came to the mic that's Beatrix. Everybody who came to the mic got 10 minutes to speak. We got 3 minutes to respond and ask questions. So we had to do, an inordinate amount of listening. That would all be cut off. And I don't think they know it. So when I say I don't think people know what to be mad at, I say that, but don't miss the point. People are really mad. And
they're like, one of the other themes last night, which was interesting, was about, who can afford a house and who can rent and things like that. Like, if you can have a chance, if you're really interested, you can go back and watch the whole YouTube about it, because there was some really interesting discussions there around, how old are you and can you afford a house in a millennial's age or not a millennial's age? And
I got told I should own a home. I said, well, anyway. So I think that's the thing to watch for 2025. Who picks who the new Liberal leader is and the prime minister is going to be a big, huge deal. And if they cannot appeal, quite frankly, to men like me, not to be stereotypical here and not to minimize the role of women, but both women and men right now prefer Pierre. Women only by a small margin. So and
I'd say there's some influence going on.
There's kind of an even fight between liberals and conservatives federally. I don't think the NDP are anywhere to be found. If they had Charlie Angus at the helm, we would be having a whole different conversation. Charlie Angus is essentially Canada's Bernie Sanders. If he were at the helm, different story. Do I think he can win Quebec? No. But can he win rural Canada? Yeah, he can. And does that account for a substantial amount of swing seats, not just any seats, like a substantial amount of the swing seats, the seats that are kind of up for grabs? Yeah, he does. Can Charlie Angus win NDP seats in Alberta? You bet your can. Can Jagmeet Singh? I don't think so.
It was a weird election for Alberta, obviously, and they went in a huge other direction away from their healthy party, but like their healthy NDP party.
And
not maintained.
Rachel Notley had a real opportunity, and now we've got former mayor of Calgary running, and he's pretty substantial. He won by a pretty substantial margin, but Saskatoon, the NDP made pretty major inroads against the Saskatchewan party. People had, for a moment, thought they could pull off a win. It's important enough to say that they won substantially, and the NDP held on to power in BC, but just barely. So oddly enough, you have this weird political climate where in Atlantic Canada, the NDP are only a real party in Nova Scotia. Really. And yet the NDP have performed well or won power in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. And they are the second place party in Ontario. So weirdly enough, the NDP would have the most momentum going into this federal election, but it's all stagnated with Singh because nobody believes Singh. He's a millionaire. He's a lawyer. He's full of platitudes and nice words, and
he had a chance for a long time.
He's getting better. I think he's getting better. I can't really say what I would disagree with him on. I want to rein in billionaires too, but I do think that's the thing to watch. And we've kind of batted that around. So what do you think? Is there anything different to watch in 2025 that you're looking for?
For New Brunswick? Anything?
Generally. Let's just.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a new frontier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're going to have to either see Susan Holt, Premier Holt, work with Pierre Poilievre or a new Liberal leader. And you can, I think there was a tweet or a headline today that was like, Holt rushes to do business with the federal government. And I know there's some stuff coming in the pipeline that will, be that. So it's sort of, it just like last year felt like a big tense, lead up cliffhanger. It now feels like it's like we're at the bottom of the mountain that needs to be climbed now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, short honeymoon for the whole government. I don't think they have, I think they pulled off a pretty substantial win in New Brunswick politics history. It's not going to last. I don't think there's a lot of energy behind the Liberal Party in New Brunswick. They were the ideal candidates to get rid of a bad premier, a very unpopular premier, and they did so successfully.
Yes.
So, you could be right? Like seeing how Susan Holt steps up to the plate. I don't think confrontation is her game.
No.
So I don't think we're going to see pretty substantial confrontation from Susan on any front. I was interested to see some of her willingness to confront Trump.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like a mosquito, standing up to a wasp. It's not a fair fight. And
our little forestry industry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $1 billion industry, but.
Okay, so let's switch to, there's what we're going to look for 25. That's what we look for in 24. What do you make of the international piece?
I know.
I can answer that first if you want, but like the international piece is the other piece of the puzzle here, because the fact that Donald Trump wants to annex Greenland, Canada, Panama, and the Panama Canal. Panama Canal is not that crazy. I mean, the Panama Canal was owned by the States.
1969?
1991.
Right. No, like late 90s. That was what it was.
Yeah, maybe 99.
Yeah.
Sorry if I'm getting my facts wrong here. Go ahead and fact check that, please. But they had agreements with the area of Panama, and they managed and maintained and controlled the Panama Canal right up until the 90s when they gave it back to the people of Panama, which was a very liberal move.
Yes.
Right? A very return power to those that are around it. And that has always been something that was tenuous.
Yeah, and it affects us big time. When we saw what happened with the Suez Canal, if anything happens with the Panama Canal, same thing, we will not have the world that we currently live in. So, and I think that's where it feels like how we'll be affected locally is when Trump starts messing around with global trade and talking about annexing and invading countries and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, we're going to be in a real serious situation here soon if he really does follow through on any of this stuff.
It is these changes are going to affect us in a pretty significant way. And I think with these tariffs, it's interesting because if you were to ask me, do I think tariffs are a good thing? I've got a book on my shelf over there by, I think it's Eric S. Reinhardt. God, I should have these facts in front of me. Anyway, how rich countries got rich and why poor countries stay poor. And the one, and I had to read that for my fourth year international relations course. And, it made a very clear point to me that tariffs are what created the sovereignty and the sovereign advantages that folks like the French Empire and the English Empire and the American Empire have enjoyed. It's only by protecting your local economy and your local producers and your local manufacturers and all of that we have gotten to a point of wealth and capital and quality of companies, if you will, that these sort of major powers have gotten to be. And then they turned around and kicked the ladder down so that nobody could climb up it by creating the World Trade Organization and the World Economic Forum and these bodies to basically make make it illegal to get rich in the same ways that that those countries got rich. So I think tariffs are a good thing to help protect and drive local production, because localization of our economy, the repatriation of our supply chains, it's the only it's the only common sense approach. It doesn't make sense to produce a battery in China and then put it on a boat and send it to LA or the western seaboard of the US, and then to train it or truck it to Atlantic Canada. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, why are jeans made in China stitched by humans?
And that's neoliberal policies, right? The idea that energy is cheap, capital is transferable, and should go to the place where the most can be produced for the lowest possible good to drive consumption. And consumption will absolutely destroy us. And the other part of that is as soon as consumption habits change, you see the fragility of these supply chains. And so in some ways, I'm like, Trump's right. You should be putting tariffs on countries to, create an environment where you have the means of production onshored to your country. Now, I don't think he's interested in empowering Missouri or empowering Maine. He's interested in making sure he and his buddies, who have the holding power of the alternative billionaire class, because don't forget the Democrats and these others have their own billionaire class. They're all just fighting each other now. Yeah. Elon Musk is now dabbling in politics in Germany with the neo-Nazi party, and the UK and Italy, and possibly here too. I mean, he is already sharing Pierre Poilievre's. So, when you talk about the trade stuff, it is a pretty substantial deal, and New Brunswick is in the crosshairs when it comes to this, because our softwood lumber is massively cheap because we subsidize the stumps. We give really prorated stumpage fees. We give Crown land away for a song to JDI, and they can cut and mill and ship lumber to the US for a fraction of what they can produce it for. But Donald Trump's up there saying we don't need it. Theoretically, he's right. They have enough forest.
Yeah.
Here's a fun fact. Guess who the biggest landholder in the US is? It's JDI. One of them is JDI, one of the biggest landholders of forestry. Why? Because they're smart enough, as a billionaire themselves, they're smart enough to read the writing on the wall years before it comes to pass. If they need to completely deindustrialize New Brunswick and reindustrialize the states with their factories and whatnot, don't you think for 1 second they won't cut their losses and do it? But it will take substantial tariffs to make that math work.
Yes.
And it's a ridiculous conundrum, because as much as it would be good for New Brunswick to get off the bandwagon of four industries and to diversify our economy, it's a painful, starvation process. And I scratched my head at it, because it's I don't think Trump's a good thing. I don't think he's smart. I think he's got smart people around him that have ulterior motives, that can sort of read the tea leaves on some of this and are willing to play ball like Elon Musk to push big things uphill. But being alive, New Brunswick is only going to be the playground of a billionaire oligarchic war between these different interests. And the international, we're in that international market. And so
thought about the port too, how is this going to affect, our Canadian ports, and our ports kind of just on the up and up here. It seems like, okay, well, we'd obviously be affected by the fact that they are, out in certain aspects when it comes to, international trade. So I feel like I can't predict anything at this point, because it's all depends on whether this lunatic that is Trump will follow through. He has been known to also just say random things and not actually go ahead with it once he's sitting there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
unpredictable 5 years to me.
the one thing I can say is there's nobody in the Liberal Party of New Brunswick that understands economics from a localization perspective that I know of, or democracy in a way that will provide leadership to the people of New Brunswick to have a story, have a pathway, have a villain, and have a hero to get behind. Like human beings, I believe, and I've listened to others talk about this, not my idea. Human beings operate largely from a story. If the story makes sense, if the villain is clear, and if the hero is clear, then there is momentum. And we don't have anybody with that kind of baseball bat in New Brunswick
But like you
provincial
said,
politics
we're like
right
the
now.
mosquito though. Like we're not. It's like we've never really had to do it. And I think I said this to you earlier. It's New Brunswick basically has always been a business interest versus a government. Like it's not. It's which is why we had a lot of comments about the history with the Better Business or with the New Brunswick Business Council and the Premier and things like that, where it just feels like are just on a hamster wheel of New Brunswick being operated as a business forever.
Yeah.
Or are we actually going to look at it as the social, a social place that we try to ensure that the betterment of the community?
You're not wrong. And to give a shout out to Sean Rouse again, he's made multiple posts and he and I have fought on Twitter, Elon's playground, X. He and I have had arguments on there recently over the Christmas holidays, actually. Love you, Sean. Don't ever take any post personally. But, Sean makes the point that, hey, look, adults are in the room, Brent. Real business decisions actually drive real results. And you can't just burn things down and expect good results. And yet, you may think it's going to be better, but that's only because we don't know what the alternative, like the different universe is here, where what you're saying could come true and what I'm saying could come true. It's true. It's not a fair fight. We don't have an example of my world where the people stand up. A corporation like Madrigon Corporation that we see in Spain, which is the 6th largest company in Spain that owns hundreds of different companies and is a cooperative and has a wealth gap between the lowest paid individual in the company and the highest paid individual in the company. And there's like 100,000 employees in Madrigon Corporation across their different holdings, of like one of the lowest in the world, right? So we don't have that example here. We don't have the Spanish example, and it's not like Spain isn't without their problems. So I'm sure you're going to point to that, but it is my ideal outcome, and I don't know what it would look like for New Brunswick to tack toward Norwegian-style industrial policy, but I would love to see it, and like just to try the thing on for. Sorry, my language. Bleep that out. Just to try the thing on for a few years and say, oh, what would happen if we had a marginal tax rate on our oil and gas companies or real estate and investment sector of 72%, or whatever the exact number is that the Norwegian.
You have to start somewhere, and there's no enthusiasm to start anywhere. And so it just becomes this feeling of, okay, well, maybe it is going to be just, and the other, like our second episode was called Groundhog Day. And is it going to be another Groundhog Day government in New Brunswick?
Nice, Gil Morgan. Nice, Gil Morgan. I should tell that story as an interlude. Sorry. Gil Morgan, for those of you don't know what that is, back in the 90s or early 2000s, there was a Pizza Hut commercial for Wing Street, when Wing Street first came out. And myself and Matt Francis and Alex Quinn at Downey Ford spent an entire year like milking this commercial for all it was worth. And the guy holds up a wing, and he's like the connoisseur of wings. And he's like, oh, nice nib, nice nub. And then he like flips it around, and he's looking at this little drumstick, and he's like, I wasn't expecting that. Nice, Gil Morgan. And it's this idea that it comes full circle, like somebody who makes a point. And Groundhog Day was our like earliest podcast because we were so frustrated with how often we go around this merry-go-round and we find a a group or a clear voice from the community that is like frustrated and radical and ready to do something completely different. And then all of a sudden, 4 years goes by, and then they're back and they're ready to do something completely different.
Yes.
But they just voted for someone that just did the same thing.
It really feels exhausting, and I think my approach to 2025 is a lot more calm and slow and intentional, because it has been such a whirlwind of the last 2 years, and it just feels like there needs to be a bit of, I said the word of the year is rebuild, a rebuilding of what it is I'm even doing here, because it just really truly feels like a merry-go-round, and it can't possibly have to be like that. It really, maybe it is. Maybe this is just the way the world is, and you have to accept it.
I don't believe that though, because like nature doesn't have that, right? Like nature has a homeostasis to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're watching a show right now, The Rig.
Yes.
And I don't know if any of you are watching The Rig, but my God, do they really zoom into this? Like, what if there was this like highly intelligent, highly alien
Thousands of years old
entity? Yeah, like highly old, like ancestor, they call it. What if there was this organism on this planet that could remember every species collapse that happened, and was super intelligent but so different, and like operated more like mushroom mycelium network, and had this ability to like sort of hijack humans but also communicate with humans in different ways. And then in this show, The Rig, on Amazon Prime, maybe Amazon Prime will send us a commission for highlighting their show.
LOL, one of those billionaires.
LOL, one of those billionaires. But like in it, it's like this like interplay between, will the company kill it? Will the company save it? Will the company appreciate it? But like nature tells us that the homeostasis is the normal thing, and that catastrophes happen, sure, collapses occur, sure, and they're devastating. But like, and yeah, of course, like a wolf is going to murder a deer.
Yeah.
But the homeostasis is that the wolves never become the dominant entity, and we are the only species that have done that. And I think our systems are so completely antithetical to that resting natural balance that it's like, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think that's our state.
It is so unnatural. And one of the points in the show is, how long have humans been alive on this earth? If you go by 100 years, and it's like 0.2 seconds or something.
Or no, by the life of the planet, billions of years. Yeah.
We are just such a blip in this whole planet's existence. And I've always operated under the assumption and thought that we are not save the planet. Like the planet's fine. It's humans that will be eradicated. So, if we're saving anyone, we're saving ourselves. When it comes to climate change, climate emergency, etc.
Species collapse.
Yeah.
And weird systems that rob nature of its, anyway, it is, there is a world that I can see in 2035, if we were going to go 10 years out, where we learned some lessons. Mm-hmm. We had some heavy hitters come in right now and scared the shit out of us about what our propensity was for destruction, but that we banded together, we unionized a collective humanity, and we elevated our consciousness to be able to produce a system that was regenerative, that was sustainable and restorative, and that we Star Trek, right?
Exactly.
The Star Trek universe. But that's not necessarily true.
All we can do is hope. That's all we can do. And ultimately, God, it's so weird having a baby, because you're like, what is 20 years in the future?
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Like, what is it going to be like for her and all the kids, of course. But, it seems like we can, all we can do is wait and see. It really feels like that. So keep waiting and seeing with us on the NB Polypod.
Yeah, next week on the NB Polypod. Anyway, thank you so much. As our first episode of 2025.
Welcome to the new format.
Yes,
Rogers.
there's going to be a new format.
She's really busy, so it's may become a little more all hands on deck right here. So
yes,
appreciate you guys for sticking through.
We are a classic couple with a little child and doing a very non-normal thing, trying to do a political podcast. So it's a very strange world. Thanks for Rogers for sticking around. Andre, you've been great.
Amazing.
As well as our Patreon supporters, you're going to get an email from us. Tune in next week. We'll be back. We're on a regular schedule and